welcome everyone to this episode of PACTS International TV. I'm Derek Robinson. On today's program, we have a great lineup of information, interviews, and announcements. First, Dr. John Hall joins us for an interview with PACTS International's Vice President, Dismi Foley. Then Melanie Vritschan, President of Ecotour, speaks of their upcoming lawsuit and about their recent conference. Next, there is a brief presentation by audio forensics expert Amy Holem. Finally, PACTS board member Jax Domnitz starts off our news segment called Sharing Our Story, as she shares at a recent TI Day rally in Sacramento, California. All coming up next on PACTS International TV.
Hi, my name is Desiree Foley, and I'm with PACTS International.
And I'm Dr. John Hall, author, physician, actor, and film producer.
Hi, and we are here to talk about some very sensitive subjects. So how are you doing, John?
Good. For those who don't know me, Dr. John Hall, I'm an anesthesiologist in San Antonio and author of A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America, Guinea Pigs, Technologies of Control, specifically about targeting.
So tell me a little bit about your activism and what you're doing.
Well, the activism was started after I had a fiance that was a victim of electronic harassment and targeting. And after trying to help her and looking into it, expose the fact that it was going on a much wider scale, really wrote the first book just to chronicle the problems that she was having and us, fighting this problem in San Antonio, Texas. And then after that book came out and doing a few radio shows, was bombarded by emails from other people that exposed the fact that this was going on a very much larger scale nationwide. So that kind of led me into the activism. The first book, A New Breed, really just the story of what happened to her. Second book, Guinea Pigs, was delving more into the technology itself and the phenomenon itself, which now has become so prevalent that if you Google electronic harassment or targeting, just about everybody knows somebody or has a family member that's been victimized by it in one way or another. So,
can you go more into depth on what you experienced with your ex-fiance?
Yeah, she essentially was targeted and sex trafficked. She was being drugged with rohypnol, and people were using her, sex trafficking her. As a matter of fact, once I had figured out what was going on and how they were putting rohypnol in foods and drink around her condominium, and then were actually controlling her through electronic control measures to drink or eat where the rohypnol was, and then was being trafficked. Some women complain of electronic rape with targeting. This wasn't electronic rape. This was physical rape. As a matter of fact, far into her targeting, once they knew I was onto them and, we were trying to get help from the police, they stopped using their own vehicles. Were even coming in rental cars and taxi cabs. And it appeared that men were actually paying money to come and rape her once she was drugged with rohypnol. She was able to kind of break free from it, mainly by moving in, with family members and changing the name.
That's the date rape drug, right? Where they don't remember.
Rohypnol is the date rape drug. What a lot of people don't realize is the date rape drug doesn't knock you unconscious. It just blocks your memory. So, those women still are struggling and are still fighting back. They just don't remember it. So in the way that I taught them, the group in San Antonio that was doing it is we had voice activated recorders, recording devices in the condo. So there was no question that it was going on. There were, multiple male voices in the room. They would break in and they were tearing things up. There were ligature marks around her wrist and ankles. Wow. And vaginal infections and things like that. So Of course, in her case, they were also threatening to kill her parents if she went for help. And a lot of it initially, I think she was remembering little bits and pieces and thinking it was a nightmare. As a matter of fact, what led me down this pathway to think something was going on is when she would call and say, well, weren't you over here last night? Didn't we have sex? And, at times when I wasn't there. So, and then we noticed the stalking, her being followed, me being followed everywhere we went. So that was really the impetus for a new breed. Just at least in my mind, I was exposing a problem that I thought was local to San Antonio. But as it turns out, it was more of a global phenomenon. And actually, quite a few women have been through that same experience.
So what made you believe her? Because I know a lot of targeted individuals try to get their family and loved ones involved, and none of them believe them. So what made you believe her?
She had no history of drug use and no history of mental illness. She was, mid-30s at the time when it all started, too old to have suddenly developed schizophrenia. And I was going over there. I mean, at the time I was engaged to her. So it was very obvious that people were coming into that kind of, she lived alone in a condominium that had bright white tile on the floor. And I would help clean the condo. And there were times where I would mop the floor. I mean, it was mopped to perfection. She maybe had not even, been in all day, had been at work the next day, come over the next, day after it's mopped, and it looked like construction workers had been in there. I mean, just blacktop, from the bottom of people's shoes all over the place, outlets that had been removed, cabinets that had been broken. And once I was onto them and identified the private investigative group that was actually behind it, then they started breaking into my house as well. So, and there's the telltale signs that just about anybody that's been targeted will tell you that they don't necessarily break in to steal stuff. They break in to go through your stuff and certainly get whatever clues, identity, alarm codes, spare keys, anything like that. But more than anything, it's a psychological operation. It's to put you in a victim state that we're going to get into your house, no matter what alarm you have, no matter how you try to protect yourself, we're going to get in and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's why they intentionally will leave clues that they've been there. They want you to know that they've been in. And it was the same thing at her condo and at my house. We would come home and there'd be a cigarette left burning in an ashtray on the island in the kitchen when neither one of us smoked or our clothes would be moved. If we'd have shoes lined up on the island of the kitchen, or all your clothes pulled out of the closet and, dumped on the bed. And I mean, just things that are meant to let you know that they've been in and have rifled through your place, but things that kind of preclude you from calling the police for any help because, burglary is not a felony unless there's a certain amount that's stolen. If nothing's stolen, then it's criminal trespassing at best. And that's just a report. The police don't follow up on that. And certainly if there's nothing stolen and you call the police and you say, well, they left a cigarette burning, there's some fresh grout on one of the tiles where it looks like they broke a tile and they brought the ladder in from my garage and it's propped up in the living room, which happened. They were actually using, our own ladder out of the garage to actually do stuff in our homes. When you give the police that report, they may take it once and kind of take it seriously. Second time you call a report like that, then you're obviously, labeled as, psychological. So, then they stop coming. And the people who do this type of stalking kind of count on that because once they know that you've discredited yourself through those kind of reports, then they're in and out.
Well, it's done on purpose.
Yeah, they're in and out. They're in and out of your home with free will. So.
And what did the police do when did you notify the police?
And luckily, I come from a family where my father was 32 years SAPD. I knew the sex crimes lieutenant in San Antonio that was in charge of the sex crimes unit. And I had voice activated recordings. She's screaming and yelling at these people. They're telling her to be quiet. They're telling each other to shut her up. She's being too loud. It was very obvious in these recordings that there were men and a woman in her house that were, sexually assaulting her. So I had no trouble making them believe that. As a matter of fact, the lieutenant in charge of sex crimes, who knew me, he had been a patient of mine as well, even said that the story was so crazy that it was coming from anybody else, he may tend not to believe it, but with the recordings where it's clear as day, that there's male voices in her condo with her and she's acting in a drug state. He said that the story gets so crazy that it's believable, that you reach a point where a story is so crazy that it's true.
Right.
Now, the problem we had is that I was trying to help her. Her parents were being threatened to be killed if she said anything. So I was going to the police trying to help her. She wasn't really trying to help herself. And important point for a lot of the people out there that are, possibly being victimized by this. If you're not willing to help yourself, nobody else can
Right.
help you. I mean, you've got to help yourself. So
Yeah, you have to help yourself.
so she eventually, I think, got out of the targeting, but by changing her name, by moving in with family, so there was always somebody around her. So,
You get any kind of updates at all?
no. I mean, if she's doing okay, then I don't want. With my activism and my books and my notoriety now,
Did she know you wrote a book about her?
oh yeah, without with government agencies and everybody knowing who I am and knowing what my activism is, I certainly don't want to be responsible for bringing it back into her life if it is out of her life.
So what's going on with your activism now? Can you give your input?
Been a little bit slow on the activism lately, as for people who don't know or haven't heard. I mean, I've had a few life setbacks of my own this year. This hasn't been the John Hall year, 2022. I'm hoping 23 is a little bit better. But for those who don't know, I'm a beekeeper in my part-time, physician full-time, but I live on a kind of a farm area and keep bees. Been stung a million times by bees, never had a problem. Last May, was feeding my horses, got stung on the side of the neck. Had at the time, I guess she was 15 months old, my daughter, home alone, and went into anaphylactic shock. Luckily, I did get a call off to 911 and had the front door open so they didn't have to kick it in. And when the ambulance got here, I was found unresponsive on my bathroom floor, cracked the back of my scalp open.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And came to getting chest compressions and IV started at both arms, and with my daughter crying in the bedroom. So turns out I have developed a severe bee venom allergy, which I didn't know. Now got to carry EpiPens, and certainly I still have beehives around the area, so I'm gonna have to probably get the bee venom therapy to adjust to that. Going through a divorce, so that has been taking a lot of my time too. So my wife and I have a daughter that just turned a year last March, and she kind of found somebody else, or at least was trying to sneak around with somebody else. So discovered that. So we're going through a divorce and a custody battle. And then if that wasn't enough, went in for a screening colonoscopy because I'm at that age where they're go get your colonoscopy, make sure you get screened for colon cancer. They nicked an artery in my colon. I almost bled to death from that about a month ago. So, kind of had my hands full with a lot of other things, including the divorce. So have kind of backed off a little bit, except for doing some expert witness testimony for some court cases that are going on right now with some other things that involve targeting that, as you know, I can't talk about. So.
Okay. I'm sorry, you're going through that. So the next thing that I wanted to bring up is the Havana syndrome. A lot of people don't hear about targeting or even pay attention, but it seems like when these diplomats came out and stated that there's some kind of energy that was being aimed at them, then all of a sudden everybody was involved. Can you talk about that?
I haven't heard of Havana syndrome. What is that? No, I'm teasing you. That's a joke.
Yeah.
That's a little TI. The interesting thing when Havana syndrome came out, I'll give you a little. I think I've told you this story, but at the time I was in a group of other physicians, and they respect the activism, and they've heard some of the stories of the targeted individuals, and certainly seen some of them that came into the office with their stories. But I think really in the back of their minds, I always kind of questioned whether or not it was real or not.
Right.
Most of these doctors didn't know anybody that was targeted. They didn't know anything about the technology till they read my books. And I think they kind of tolerated me, and said, well, kind of sounds crazy. Maybe it's real, maybe it's craziness, but he's a good doctor, so we tolerate him. It's kind of funny when the Havana syndrome thing came out, and it came out that it was microwave-based weapons and that these diplomats were doing it, and it was on Fox News and it was on CNN. I had several of my colleagues say, "Oh my God, we always thought that, you weren't crazy. You were just about 15 years ahead of your time."
Right.
So, I mean, I think the Havana Syndrome, you don't wish targeting on anybody, certainly even not those people. Most of the people that, and I've talked to some of them, they're not the diplomats. They're lower level employees of the embassy that were targeted. You don't wish it on anybody, but the nice thing about it happening is the government was forced to address it since it was happening to their own. Now that's the problem we're seeing now is they're addressing it much in the same way that they're addressing it in the civilian population. They're basically ignoring it, kind of putting it on the back burner. I don't think our government expected the researchers at UPenn when they looked at a lot of these victims, and it happened to Canadian citizens as well, not just US citizens. I don't think the government was expecting the researchers to come up with, well, it looks like they were attacked by microwave weapons. And the reason that the way they came up with that is they did a type of MRI called diffusion tensor imaging, DTI MRIs. And what that does is it actually looks at the white matter tracks, and it can show you breakage in the actual tracks between neurons. It's called diffusion tensor imaging. And that is one way to discover damage done by this type of energy. I don't think they were expecting them to find it. I think when they sent all these people to researchers, they were expecting the researchers to say, we didn't find anything, we don't know what it is. It's as of yet unexplainable. And that is what a lot of the news articles initially came out. Then they started putting out the false information. Then the information started coming out, well, we think it's crickets chirping. We think it's interference waves, interference frequencies between pre-existing surveillance, devices that are already in the embassy. Blamed on the Russians, which is also probably false. My favorite one is when they finally said, well, we've had people around these crickets for 100 years, in Cuba, probably not the crickets. Well, then they said, well, they're spraying permethrin around as an insecticide. It's probably permethrin. Well, permethrin's been in use for 100 years too. Permethrin is what is in the kitchen spray that's over here in my kitchen or anybody's kitchen that's in kitchen safe spray. Permethrin's a pretty safe insecticide, and it's never been known to make people hear voices. So,
was there any other symptoms that they were experiencing? Were they hearing voices? Is that what they were saying?
Yeah. Initially, the reports that you saw that came out of the press said that they were hearing ringing in their ears. Now, remember, we did studies long ago when it came to targeting 10 years ago or more now that found that almost all targeted individuals started with ringing in the ears.
Tinnitus.
Yeah, that it was about 60% higher in the TI population than the normal community. So that was what first keyed me in. As a matter of fact, when all of that broke, I was doing a show with Clyde Lewis on Ground Zero. And he said, well, they're saying it's possibly an acoustic weapon. I said, it ain't acoustic. Said, these people are all complaining of tinnitus. It's going to be a microwave-based weapon that's causing it. And sure enough, that's what the researchers at UPenn all came up with too. So my personal belief with Havana Syndrome is I think it was probably a government agenda at the time. They were trying to try their best to tie Trump to Russia. The powers that be, intelligence community especially, hated Trump. They were hoping he would get impeached. You have to commit treason, to have an impeachable offense. And certainly if you're in cahoots with a Russian leader and allowing Russia to attack people in our embassy, that certainly is, treasonous enough to pursue impeachment. So I think that was just another avenue of multi-avenues they were going to take down Trump. My personal belief is that the Russians probably put so much surveillance equipment in that embassy while it was being built in Cuba that there's no way they needed to use this technology to actually do surveillance on that embassy. I think they know every spoken word, from every side of any conversation that's done at an embassy without needing this technology to do it. Once some of those theories came out that it was probably our own government doing it, well, then you started to see, well, here's a couple of people in China, here's a couple of people in Israel, here's a couple of people in DC. I think they spread out some of the victimization to make it look like it was possibly another actor, but I just don't see any reason that Russia would be doing it. And I certainly don't think Cuba's doing it. I don't think they have access to the technology to do it.
And for our new viewers that are non-TIs, can you kind of give us a background of all the experiments that have taken place in the past?
Well, I mean, for anybody that's new to this, if you don't believe that this technology has been worked on forever, look up MK Ultra, MK Search, Mockingbird. I mean, they have been working on figuring out ways to control the human mind or direct the human mind or direct human behavior since the 1940s. So, I mean, it's as technology progresses, so does the ability to, experiment on people. And on the old days, to do this type of technology and experiment on people with it, you would have to bring them into a lab and do it. If you're experimenting with technology where you're looking to see how quickly you can degrade someone's life by making them hear voices and simulating schizophrenia or psychosis, you can't do that on a willing participant.
Right.
If I tell you, I've got this apparatus and I'm going to put voices in your head and you tell me when you hear them, well, you're going to say, okay, I hear it. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. I mean, they already know it works. What they need to know is how quickly they can degrade someone to homelessness, joblessness, familylessness. And you can only get that data from attacking the unwilling. So, I mean, that's kind of why they're doing it. But anybody that does any research on MK Ultra can see that this is an extension of that. It's just a continuation of the same research under a different moniker.
And wasn't that exposed? Didn't the government come clean and say?
Yeah. Well, they tried to erase all that. They, shredded most of their records. They weren't able to shred the financial records. And a really great book on that was by Colin Ross, which was Human Atrocities. I think the name is Human Atrocities by American Psychiatrists. All of these mind control studies with MK Ultra were headed up by psychiatrists who were heads in their field. One of them was the head of the Canadian Psychiatric Association. One was the head of the American Psychiatric Association. All of them died with glowing eulogies about, what they provided to medical science before they died. And all of them were monsters as far as experimenting on, the unwitting. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That, I mean, the government came clean and stated that they were doing this experiment. So that's what I don't understand now is that anytime these kind of subjects are brought to anyone's attention, people often say, there's no way that's happening. That's crazy. Nobody was going to do that. But then history, it's repeating itself. It's just more covert.
Well, and that's while Havana syndrome being exposed, I think, is a gift to the TI community because you can tag along onto that. Now you have people that work for the government. The government at least did admit that something happened to these people. Well, now they're trying to back away from that, figure out ways to get out of it. They're not helping. I mean, all of these families and people that were victimized are pissed. The Canadians are pissed. The Americans are pissed. They feel like the government's kind of ignoring them. So eventually there are more of them, once their gag orders are lifted, will come out. And I think their information is going to be valuable, to join in with the TI community. Because in the past, most of the focus with the TI community has been on ways to shield from it or ways to jam it or looking for, either nanotechnology or lower technology chips in the body that can be removed to make it go away. And unfortunately, people will notice that, especially my second book is politically oriented. The solution is going to have to be political. None of us are ever going to be able to afford to walk around in an anechoic chamber or have a suit that shields you from everything. And as the technology progresses, the ability for them to do this and the ability for you to block it is going to decrease. So the solution has to be political. It has to be putting leaders in the office that will stop non-consensual experimentation in the United States, and actually will look into this. We'll have a Rockefeller Commission, a church committee hearing, some type of congressional hearing to get to the bottom of it and pull the reins on the intelligence services because they're out of control.
And do you think that's going to happen anytime soon?
If we can get the right people in, I think it will. Not to be political, but my personal thoughts, we have two parties in our government, Republican and Democrat. Unfortunately, the Democrats have gone to bed with China And if anybody's ever looked at the way China controls their population, that's what they want for here. They want America to be controlled just like China controls their population. That's where this technology has always been headed. Now, the problem with the Republicans is they may not say they want that same thing, but they certainly don't do anything to prevent it. They kind of go along to get along. So one of those parties, we're going to have to get some good ethical, moral people in there to actually fight it. Right now, I don't think it's the Democrat Party. They've gone far, too left. But if we can get constitutional-minded Republicans in there, that probably may be the way to go. I don't know. Unfortunately, we're in a country where you can't have a third party. We have a two-party system. It'll always be a two-party system. You have to play the game that's, that you're put in, and that's the game. So.
And what do you think the agenda is, and why this is being done?
Control, straight up control. They eventually want to be able to control everything. I mean, and they're just about there. They can track every bank transaction you do using a debit card now. I mean, you buy a car now, you don't have to put a tracker on it. They come preloaded with GPS, especially the newer cars, Dodge U-Verse, Subaru has Starlink, Ford has Ford Pass. You can click on an app and it'll tell you exactly where your vehicle is. Well, they can do that too. Everything that we do on the internet, Google, Facebook, everybody, on these internet platforms are selling their data, not only to our government, to China. So, I mean, it's a battle against privacy, and we're losing it. So.
And how many people do you think this is affecting that you know of, that a guess?
We had a conversation yesterday that I think kind of should have piqued your interest, but my personal opinion is that everybody is affected by it. But everybody, I think, is being controlled to an extent. I think the people that refer to themselves as targeted individuals and come forward complaining about the technology, I think, are the people that are somewhat resistant to the control measures, or that recognize the energy that's being used on them, or the government has figured out aren't being controlled. So they have to set out to actually degrade that person, make them look like they're mentally ill, or, so they're discredited from letting anybody else know what's really going on. So I think probably the best answer to that question, I think everybody's being controlled. But I think the handful of people that identify as legitimate targeted individuals are the people resistant to the control. But if everybody else is being controlled, you're never going to convince them that that's the case.
Right. And can you explain some of the symptoms when you're being targeted?
Well, one of them's not a symptom, but one of the first things that just about everybody complains about is stalking. And I think that's to not only put you in a psychological victim state that you're being stalked and you can't do anything to stop it. Even when you report it to the police won't do anything. But I think it's also to garner biometric data from you that they need to actually do the electronic part of the stalking. Once the physical stalking tapers off, that's when you're left with the electronic version of it. And that's, finding burning on your skin, tinnitus, as we talked about, is really prevalent in the TI population. Voices, voice to God or voice to skull. What people call voice to skull a lot of times is actually hearing voices and vibrations around you if you really nail it down.
It bounces off sound.
Yeah, bounces off sound. So you need some type of air movement to actually finish amplifying it for, your ear to pick it up. Now there's also bone conduction type sound that is true voice to skull, like we used to use in the old days with neurophones and things like that, where you can put a transmitter anywhere on the body and still hear the sound coming through the inner ear. And then you started getting into the worst things. That's, the trafficking, controlling people, the attacking people until they're burned in the throat, in the eyes, and the genitals, especially. Women report electronic rape, so do men. So and the bad thing is the technology is meant to be non-lethal. So as long as it's on and you're being bombarded with it, it hurts and it burns. The minute they turn it off, typically doesn't leave any marks. Now, some people do end up left with a lot of red marks and scarring, but for the most part, if you were to get burned by millimeter wave based weapons and then show it to somebody, go, see where they're burning me right there. Usually that other person can't notice that there's anything happening. And that's why it is the perfect crime, because there's really no way to prove it. There's no way to display it. And the best way to stop it is to stop it at the stalking phase, where you have physical people stalking you.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, a lot of people don't recognize that when it happens. So.
And can this be confused with paranormal activity?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've had a number of people that actually call and initially thought they were being haunted.
Yes.
And I mean, I didn't realize it. Chris Jordan with Curious Realm actually had pointed out to me that there was actually a psychological group that actually did an entire paper called the Hall Effect, based on my book, saying that this was a paranormal form of people reading my books and then self-haunting themselves, thinking that they're hearing voices. So, so I'm honored to have a psychological paper called the Hall Effect, based on my name.
Now everybody has that.
Now, mind you, this group was outside the United States. They didn't call me. They didn't interview me. They strictly did this paper based on reading my books. There was no interview on my part. Didn't even call to ask my advice on it, but said that TIs were suffering from the Hall Effect.
Was it from another country?
Yeah, I believe they were in the UK. Yeah, so, but I think it was just another attempt at disinformation by the government. As you know, you can't buy these books on government computers. So.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the movie The Conjuring. Have you seen it?
Mm-hmm.
And when the first time that I watched The Conjuring and I saw it, and obviously it's based off a true story. And of course, when you watch a movie, obviously it's not the exact story, but just watching the movie and all the things that this family was experiencing, it kind of mimics the TI phenomenon. And I'm thinking maybe, I'm not sure. I mean, I do believe in the paranormal, but it was just too much like the targeting with with things like flying off the walls. Like it was almost like there was like energy in the house, and the scratches, the bruises. And if you were to take that movie and turn it around and put a TI twist to it, that's exactly what TI's experience.
Yeah, and if you notice in most of the ghost stories like that, it's always the house is built on an Indian graveyard, or it's a Civil War site. It's always romanticized with that ghosts have to come from the mid 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why isn't the guy that got stabbed up here at the market by my house a mile away? Why isn't his ghost haunting anybody?
Right.
He died before his time too. It's never that. I'm not real into the whole ghost thing for that reason,
Mm-hmm.
because it's never Bobby who got stabbed to death in a drug deal up the street that's haunting you. It's always somebody buried in an Indian graveyard from 1850,
Right.
In an old creepy mansion. It's not a guy that died in the hood, in a drug deal,
Mm-hmm.
So, if haunting is real and ghosts are real, they should be able to come back as a ghost just as easy as anybody else. And the same thing with the alien phenomenon.
I like aliens.
That I think a lot of the people experiencing alien abduction, probably, if you really tie it down, are probably being controlled.
Yeah, Stephen Greer talks about that in his documentaries, that a lot of these alien abductions is the military that is abducting these individuals and giving them false memories. If you guys don't know who Dr. Greer is, I would highly recommend watching some of his documentaries, but he talks about that.
And that happens. And there's actually a foundation called the False Memory Foundation that deals strictly in that kind of suggestive technology, that where you can take people and break them down through torture, conditioning or electronic conditioning, and actually implant false memories where
Mm-hmm.
people think they've been on another planet battling aliens, or, think they've been up to a mothership. And I've always been suspect of the people that are being abducted and taken up to a ship to see if they're really being taken by
Right.
ambulance to a nearby research facility and being messed with and then taken back home while they're in a drug state. So.
And when somebody thinks that they're falling victim to this phenomenon, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah. For one, don't try to convince your family members that don't believe you over and over and over again. It'll be your family members that park you in front of a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist is not going to read my books. He's not going to look at any of your research you've done on Google. Their job is to diagnose you and put you on meds. That being said, I mean, there are some people that are psychotic and are schizophrenic, and if you're one of those people, the meds are going to help you.
Right.
If you're a targeted individual, you can try the meds. If you're being targeted, the targeted is going to still continue just as it was. So be careful who you reach out to. Be careful what you read on the internet. Not all the information out there is legitimate. Certainly, a lot of it's not correct, but some of it is. There are organizations that can help. You can learn from other people's failures. My biggest thing is, I guess, the first failure that almost all TIs come across is going so far out of their way to convince their family members that this is going on with them. Your family members do care about you. Your family members are rarely going to be part of this. They will try to convince you that your family members are the ones doing this to you, because they know when you start acting out against your mother or your father or your spouse, accusing them of using electronic measures to control you and put voices in your head, because they can mimic those voices. So it is going to sound like it's your loved one doing it to you. Well, they want you to strike out against those people, because those are the first people that are going to park you in an insane asylum to get evaluated. So, and once that happens, the rest of your life tends to kind of unravel. So, I mean, that would be my biggest advice, is just keep it to yourself initially, get online, find some of these organizations like PACTS or that can point you in the right direction, and try to avoid the pitfalls that unfortunately every TI makes. Because usually by the time they get around to talk to me, they've already made those pitfalls.
Right.
You know, they went, well, you know, I already accused my mother and father of being the ones behind all this, and they sent me to a psychiatrist. I'm like, yeah, well, I wish you'd gotten a hold of me ahead of time. It's probably not them. You know, but your family members are the ones that do remember every crazy thing you've ever done in your life for real, you know, when you were young or crazy or whatever. So when you start talking crazy stuff to them, they love you and they care about you enough that they are thinking they're going to get you help. But the biggest thing is, with this technology, they can put any voice around you that they want to. It can sound like your mother, it can sound like your father, it can sound like me. You know, I've had, you know, individuals call and say, well, I know it's you doing it because I hear you and Dr. Robert Duncan's voice. We do interviews. So they have sound bites and they have, you know, recordings of what we sound like. So, I mean, and that's happened. I'm sure, you know, it's happened to you.
And well, two more questions. Okay, so once somebody's 5150 and they go see a judge and the judge determines that there is something mentally wrong and they're ordered to be forced to take medication, I heard, which I don't know if it's correct, that once that happens, you're no longer able to testify in court. Is that correct?
I don't know. I would hate to give legal advice on that, because I mean, I'm not. I know that's in California.
Oh,
we don't,
okay.
yeah,
I heard it from somewhere.
Yeah, 5150 is a California law. We don't have that here in Texas, but I'm sure we have a law like it. But no, I mean, I would hate to say, because I just don't know. Yeah, but I imagine any lawyer on the other side would certainly call your testimony into question if you had a history of having a 5150.
Okay, and before we close, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, just be cognizant that society's changing, political landscape is changing. We're being controlled from pretty much every avenue, and it's not just this type of targeting. I mean, you're only being allowed to see the news that they want you to see. Twitter is censoring what you can see. Facebook is censoring what you can see. We're drowning in information and starving for wisdom.
Well, thank you, Dr. John Hall.
You're welcome.
And these are the two books that he wrote. This is the first one, A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America. If you don't have it, I would highly recommend this book. And the second book right here is Guinea Pigs.
And there was a third book I'm trying to get finished called The Fourth Branch, which once I get through this divorce and custody hearing, I hope to be getting that out there. So,
well, I appreciate you.
Dear victims, dear members, I had written the speech for this video a while ago. I come back to you with this video after a longer break due to the summer holidays and several severe targeted attacks on me. Such life-threatening attacks on me and members of my family are going on in a continuous manner throughout the year, but always increase in severity just before an ICATOR event. In this case, it was a RF scanning held in a shielded environment, a certified Faraday cage, that turned out to be very successful, but attacks like these are not rare and are also perpetrated to stop me from organizing and attending lawyers' appointments with or on behalf of our members. The perpetrators intensify their efforts to eliminate me, with actions such as slicing my car tires whilst I'm on a steep slope and driving in heavy rain, or cutting off my road on the highway, hoping that I will not have the necessary time or reaction capabilities to avoid an accident, which they hope will be fatal, or at least that I sustain heavy injuries. To show you an example of such an attack, I will show you this video which the garage made of the tires that had been slashed on my vehicle during a medical consultation I had in a local hospital. Luckily, I managed to drive with the damaged car in heavy rain and on a slippery road to a nearby garage to get the vehicle repaired just in time before the Ecotour scanning event started. This event, attended by 16 participants from Belgium, Bulgaria, France, Germany, Greece, the Netherlands, Spain and the United States, was very successful and was also coupled with lawyer appointments for the members to be able to address their questions to our counselor. Just a second, I will show you the video of my tires that were slashed. So, just one moment. I hope you can see this. That is how the tires looked after I came back from the medical appointment in the hospital. And they were slit not only from the outside, but also from the inside. Also, you can see here in the inside it's also slit. Yeah. So this was, of course, to eliminate me. It was, or at least injure me very heavily, and it was just a couple of days prior to the very successful scanning event that we had that I just mentioned. So you have seen this, just to give you an example. But to reassure you for future events, as well as to give a message to the perpetrators that will probably listen to this video, as I'm studied for fear, my reactions to intimidation and covert and overt threats, I can tell you right now that no scheduled ICATOR event will ever fail because of their attacks on me. Even if they should be successful one day in producing a fatal car accident or an induced heart attack or stroke, as there always is a second and even a third person in the know who will carry out the event as planned, even if I should be unable to do it myself. So, perpetrators, I know you're trying very hard to intimidate me, to interfere with my legal claims at the insurance, in deleting emails or in not sending me the legal forms required to file a damage claim to stop the investigation to go further. I'm also aware that you do not have the human intelligence on your side to understand that all these attempts at intimidation had no effect on me, nor will they ever have one. And the only result is that the complaints at the police are on the rise. I appreciate that. But also, be assured that there's nothing you can do to prevent justice from being done, and to be held accountable for your crimes to hundreds of thousands of innocent people around the world, all our members and their families. For the victims, let me assure you once again that this is what is going to happen. Justice will be done. And it is being done at this very moment. And I, on behalf of Ecotour and my board member colleagues, I would like to thank you for your trust and your support, as without it we could not achieve what we are doing, and that will be to the benefit of all good citizens around the world that deserve to live in peace and happiness. Talking about justice and the legal process that we are currently involved with on behalf of all of our members, which should, however, also benefit all of the victims of electronic terrorism around the world, may they be Ecotour members or not. Although our last member event in June, which included a lawyers' meeting measurements in a certified Faraday cage, was very successful, out of 16 participants, 12 had positive readings within the controlled environment, we have decided to broaden our evidence-finding methods. On 24th and 25th of October, Amy Holem came to Brussels to perform thermal scans. These scans detect radiation injuries not visible to the naked eye. They can reveal suspicious overheating areas, such as produced by illegal medical implants and nanotechnology weapons. She then takes normal photos of the body on which she superimposes the scans. Amy is currently still in Europe. Appointments are to be taken directly with Amy Holem, and the $300 scanning fee is to be settled directly to Amy as well. But Ecotour had to pay for the venue out of the donations we receive to be able to hold this event. We therefore now need to request further donations to be able to refill our account and finance running and future projects. On 26th of October, Ecotour has organized a meeting with our lawyer for our members wanting to participate in the lawsuit, to meet him and address him with their questions and queries. Following this meeting, our head lawyer has decided to organize a major conference to present Ecotour to the members of his network, and more specifically to scientists, doctors and other lawyers. Amy Holem, whose forensic method has been validated by Dr. Barry Trower at a recent meeting with him in the UK, will present her work to have it peer-reviewed by other scientists present. We now need to finance the conference costs, as well as to be able to pay our experts who will be presenting. The physicist and psychotronic weapons expert, Mr. Daniel Dupree, will open the conference, sharing his wealth of knowledge on electromagnetic weapons. As this event will serve as documentation in view of the upcoming court case, it will be videotaped to be available for the judge to view. English-French translation has been organized. Please help us to cover the conference costs for organization, venue, catering services, translation, and above all, our experts' fees that have to be covered. Under membership and donations on our website, you will find our crowdfunding page, fundraiser, as well as our bank details, including our IBAN number to make a bank transfer. Our objective is to raise €3,000. Every donation helps. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our Australian board member, Mr. Craig Laforest, who has donated for us to be able to purchase a beamer, making the French translation for the judge and other French-speaking members of the Belgian justice system possible. Thank you, Craig. And thank you to all of our members and donors who have supported us so far. Please help us with donations for this conference and in the furtherance of the objective of the ICATOR international lawsuit. Thank you. Goodbye.
To be converted into it. This is where the RF signals come from, the radio frequencies. Whether it's megahertz, gigahertz, decibels, kilohertz. Sorry. Each one is converted back to the hertz. That is your frequency control. Okay? So then the pictures and images go back to the neurological connection to the brain, depending what type of activity that they want to control. Whether it's from the optical nervous center, which is through, this is your red, green, and blue cones, which also correlate with television, computers, monitors, and LED systems. So there's obviously a lot more electrical components. Gaming systems. Streams. And feeds. Okay. So the output with the neural network systems, those would be the videos and pictures, the projections, the holograms, the virtualization systems that we physically see. Those are how they're manipulating them. It kind of depends. There are different projects that are being used, which will be discussed with the lawyer. Different types of projects are like motion-to-motion capturing. Motion-to-motion capturing is basically your hologram systems where a person is standing in front of a computer system with a bunch of electrodes on their body. And they're moving, and it pictures, and it goes back into whatever software that they're using, right? Because every software has specific capabilities. So it depends on what type of project that they're working on, depends on the software that they're going to be using for those type of visualizations and those different types of effects. We do have different types of software systems. So that information will be talked about and discussed. Research has already been done on it. They're inside the victims' reports. So that's classified information. I can't give that out right now. Mm-hmm. So depending on the software, they can project that image, their movement, into the person's mind. So when the victims say, hey, I see the people moving in real time. I see the person having sex with another person. I see them hitting a kid or something like that, right? Everybody is experiencing different effects from the neurological side. That is exactly what they're doing. It's a type of motion capturing, which is actually used in a lot of animation and movies for Hollywood studios, like Hollywood. Your actors. Sorry, I got horrible handwriting. So that's the type of, this would be like your green screens too. If you picture it in that concept, that's a form of motion capturing. That specific software.
And how can you detect that there are graphene inside of the nervous system?
So when we're doing the thermal imaging exams, right, I look at the different types of nerves and the different capabilities of each of those nerves. I also can deal with the senses, find out what that nerve is for, whether it's motor, sensory, or mixed. These motor functions, sensories and mixed, depends on the weapon system's capabilities. Laser only has specific capabilities, right? You have to match the wound, the type of wound that was found or discovered on your body when I was taking pictures with them, and match the weapon systems with it. And from there I can tell whether it's microwave, electromagnetic, kinetic, ultra, ultrasonic, laser, or solar weapon system. So, depending on the wound that I took pictures of, gives me an idea of what type of energy source that they're using on the human body. But that takes research, and that's a lot of time. That's why my reports take a little while to create and stuff like that. So it's not just as simple as taking thermal images and marking the body. It's one, marking it from location to location, mapping out your whole entire body system, and trying to figure out the nerves and the connections of where they're doing to force your body movements and to create different types of sensations throughout your body system. So, that's one aspect.
Today at the Capitol here in our beautiful state of California. I have been stalked for 15 years and still ongoing. The stalking for me began in 2004 when the house next door to me was sold. The new neighbor next door started surveillance on me immediately when he and his wife moved in. My life was diabolically changed. These new neighbors surveilled every movement I made, and they wanted me to know it. When I am sleeping, eating, dressing, and bathing, I am always watched. My swimming pool is on his 60-inch TV. I am radar waved on my head while swimming. I have seen myself on his TV. These evil neighbors have convinced my neighborhood to harass and stalk me. My neighbors have stalkers accusing me of assault repeatedly. In 2017, I was accused of aggravated assault by trying to run over a child. Not true. In 2018, I was accused of a hate crime and assault. Not true. In February 2019, I was accused of disorderly conduct. Not true. In July 2019, I was accused again of aggravated assault in a grocery parking lot. Cameras proved in every instance that absolutely nothing happened. That is how far these psychopaths will go to frame people. My injuries are consistent with those of direct energy weapons. I have bioeffects of being assaulted with radar waves for 15 years. One injury I have is that of damage to the inner ear, tinnitus, and hearing loss. I require 2 hearing aids now. I have seen Dr. Hoffer in Miami. He examined the American diplomats who were here hit with similar weapons. Dr. Hoffer understands what direct energy weapons can do and how they work. I want to ask you, why is it that one doctor is sworn to secrecy for fear of his license being revoked? And why is it that my next door neighbor, who is a psychopath, is a doctor who is pointing this weapon at my ears with impunity? On Friday, May 3rd, 2019, I went to the Holiday Inn Express in San Mateo. I started getting radar wave assaulted about 2 minutes after I walked into that room. I started investigating. My phone began to crackle each time I passed a certain closet door in my room. I noticed that there was a radio wave geofence around the bed. A geofence is an electrical invisible fence that alerts when there is movement crossing it, something like a dog fence on a human. That's what they do to us. We're no better than dogs. And by the way, dogs are awesome. It was vibrating on the floor, under the bed, and all over the bed. There was a door in my room that did not have a doorknob. There was at least a 1.5-inch space between the carpet and bottom of the door. like this much. I laid on the floor and I looked through that gap. I saw something that did not fit. It was this black box. That black box. And it was plugged into the wall adjacent to my room. I laid there and stared at it for a long time, at least 10 or 15 minutes, while I was being hit with this pain. I got a pen and paper and I began to copy the strange emblems that I noticed on the black box. It was difficult. I also took a photograph, but it wasn't able to catch it all because it was under the door and my eye could see what my phone camera could not. So I have tried my best to preserve that for you, and so you can look at it. On May 2019, I went to another Holiday Inn Express in Burlingame. When I checked in, the geofence vibrations started again. I was radar wave detect every 30 to 60 seconds. At 5 a.m., I noticed that the geofence vibrations were non-stop, surrounding both beds in my room. I realized that the operator of this black box weapon must have fallen asleep on the job. I decided to take advantage of this psychopath's dereliction of duty. I called the desk clerk to my room. After she touched my bed and felt the vibrations, she gave me a different room, one floor below. I went to room 209 and the identical assault started again. After being stalked 15 years, I started realizing that this radar wave assault was a criminal activity being perpetrated against me. On the afternoon of May 17th, 2019, I drove my car to Skyline Boulevard in Millbrae. I covered all of my car windows, all over, so nobody could see me. But I was watching. I left a couple holes so I could watch what happened outside. I started feeling an unusual type of radar wave pain on both of my legs simultaneously. This assault was different from any I had experienced before. The first thought that came to my mind was that this is a very angry and seriously experienced person on the opposite end of this weapon. I immediately moved my car behind his car. I noticed an older white male, about 50-ish, smoking a cigarette, like holding it like this, and holding his phone in the other hand. There was a Navy emblem on his car. There was a permanent handicap emblem on his rear plate. I got out of my car and walked up to him. I could see a pixelated image of what I thought was my body, just like that. I recreated that for you. It was on his phone. That image was on his phone. He was running his fingers down the legs, starting above the knees and ending at the toes. Because he was...
There you go.
Because it was unique, I want to show you how he did it. I was filling it on both legs, and he took his hand like this. And he was stroking both of my legs. I asked the Navy man, "Why are you hurting me?" He laughed a wicked laugh. I will never forget the smell of that cigarette. It smelled like a cherry Tiparillo. I looked inside his car. There was that black box in the passenger seat. He quickly shoved the black box into a black cloth briefcase. It was plugged into his AC adapter in his car. He had a scar on his face. He had gray salt and pepper hair, mostly gray. His lower body was immobile. His legs could have been a prosthesis, 2 prostheses. The assault was an aggression transference, in my humble opinion. He hurt my legs because he didn't have any legs. Are we being assaulted because the perpetrators don't have a heart? They don't have a conscience? They don't have legs? What's wrong with these people? I quickly summed up my situation mentally. I didn't know who he was. I knew if I called the cops, it was this psychopath's word against mine. I still didn't have proof of what the black box was, except in my own mind. I didn't even know what it was called. I walked away defeated again. This is our national rally. Today we are not defeated. Right. We are here for this cause, and we are going to solve this. Right. And with stuff like this, we're going to get them. Right. So I need all of you to look at this and watch for this in somebody's car when they're harassing you. Let me explain. I know that this black box is called the Ravenclaw. It's manufactured by Raytheon. My neighbor played recordings of ravens when he assaulted me for 5 long years. 5 years of ravens. Mimicking my every move and harassing me with a noise campaign in every part of my home, my office, and everywhere I drive. Every destination I go to has been set up to emulate a battlefield of planes, helicopters, drones, hissing and chirping sounds, ravens cawing, and a cacophony of irritational, diabolical war sounds. The noise is played in the vehicles of the stalkers who assist in this G.I. Joe, G.I. Jane game of war. Many of the stalkers use this Ravenclaw or something very similar. I see stalkers on foot with a backpack shooting radar waves at me. They walk by, and when their backpack is directly in sight, line of sight, in front of me or my vehicle, they press something on their phone, and I'm assaulted. I have documented patterns of how the weapon is used. They like to shoot the skull, the ears, the eyes, and the heart, but they will shoot any part of my body for target practice. I want to share this information with the innocent civilians in the state of California. This is a crime of repeated, aggravated assault and perversion. Using this weapon is a crime against thousands of citizens across the great state of California. Innocent people have been drafted into a real-life Kill Bill, Frame Jane, G.I. Joe, G.I. Jane game. It is a computerized war game that pairs Ravenclaw with the user's Bluetooth. I will describe the user-friendly features of Ravenclaw. There is no host, server, or network connection required. It pairs directly with their cell phones, a laptop, or any pairable device. It's wireless. It has line-of-sight propagation. Electromagnetic radiation waves travel in a direct path, straight line from the source to the receiver. Point and shoot. Notice I shot down. I'm not shooting at anybody like those perps. Surveillance listens within a geographical limit. So my opinion is they're close by. They listen because it can't listen very far. It's not like they're in Montana. They're in your neighborhood. Through the wall sensors. Sees through the walls. It sees through our clothing. Yes, it sees us naked. Biofencing alarms. It lets the operator know when the human subject's body moves, our eyes open, our mouth opens, we move our leg. It alerts the user. That's especially why when we wake up, we notice that they're right on us. It's not because they're sitting there staring at us. They have an alert. It's an alarm, like they use in war. Geofencing alarms. It lets the operator know when the human subject's body crosses specific geographical boundaries. For example, when you open your door, the alarm alerts the perpetrator. And that's why they start all the noise campaign. They start harassing you the minute you walk out the door. It's not because they're staring. They're too lazy. They have alarms. Electronic jammers. Jammers radiate interfering signals toward an enemy's radio waves, cell phones, radios, Wi-Fi. That's how they mess with our phones, our Wi-Fi, and all of our electrical devices. Electronic countermeasure. The deliberate radiation or re-radiation and alteration, suppression, absorption, denial, enhancement, or reflection of electromagnetic energy in a manner intended to convey misleading information and to deny valid information to enemy electronics. So when we go and try to use a spectrum analyzer and triangulate, the signal is destroyed. Weaponization of the electromagnetic spectrum is used as a pain weapon, specifically in human subjects, using these constants here. Okay, I want to let you know what the disadvantages are for the perpetrators, the operators. For them, this is their disadvantages. This is a crime involving moral turpitude, CIMT, by all three definitions categorically. Number one, using this weapon is shocking to the public conscience. The public cannot even imagine what we're going through. That's the test right there. Number two, using this weapon is vile and depraved. Number three, using this weapon is contrary to the rules, morality, and duties of society. Punishment will be severe, and it will be an add-on to the already existing aggravated assault and numerous other things that these perpetrators have done to our bodies and our life and our privacy, and the accusations. And I intend to see every person here who's been placed in a psych ward exonerated. If you, the operator of the Ravenclaw or a similar weapon, are convicted, you could have your green card or visa revoked. You will have your personal license revoked. Hey, educators, attorneys, and doctors, you're going to face adverse consequences. The legal definition of this crime is aggravated assault. The geographical limitations require close proximity. This makes it easy to catch the perpetrators. Once you catch on, you can figure it out. Line of sight propagation. It works best when waves travel in a direct path, straight line. This makes it easy to catch them. Addictive behavior. This is really good for you guys to learn what these guys are about. This is why it's so easy to catch them. Their mental state of mind. They are addicted. Distance. And the reason is there's a distance from human victim, desensitizing the weapons operators. Less likely to feel shock or distress or cruelty because they never see us cry. They don't see what it's doing to us. They don't see the marks and the bruises and the fear on our face. They're just sitting there in front of their computer, killing us slowly, killing me softly with his little weapon. This crime gratifies and stimulates the operator by participating in the hunt and the chase. It is a new low for man's inhumanity to man. It is a new depravity for evil psychopaths. I have studied some of Helena Sorba's information about the radar waves. She's an engineer in the state of Pennsylvania. She distributed a list of dielectric constants that could be used by this Raytheon weapon. Based on the Navy paraplegics actions, this weapon is positioned line of sight propagation adjacent to the human subject. The dielectric constant is entered, any part of the body. They store it, and that's how they can shoot us again and again and again so accurately. It's stored. The dielectric constant is entered, weapon is positioned, and game on. The closer, the better, because the pain is worse when the Ravenclaw is on top of the human subject. I want to thank everybody. I hope you will keep your eye out just notice how when you're driving or walking, the activity, and when you're hit, look around. You're going to see a particular person who's very interested in you. And they usually have something in a purse or a baby's carriage or a backpack. They hide it, but not so well. And you'll get so good at being able to direct where it's coming from. And I want to see this end, and I want to thank everybody for listening to my speech. I was very nervous about it, and I know there are different weapons. I just want to say there are different weapons out there, but I've been noticing that this weapon is the most common that I've been seeing. And you guys have other experiences, and you're very welcome. And I don't want to represent everyone. This is just what I've been experiencing. But it is accurate from my experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jax. Appreciate it. Appreciate you.
that's our program for today. Thanks to our guests, Dr. John Hall, Melanie Vritschan, Amy Holem, and Jax Domnitz for participating with us on today's show. And thanks to all of you for being there. And if you liked our show, please give us a like and subscribe to be informed of future episodes. I'm Derek Robinson, and we'll see you next time on PACTS International TV.